Okay. And I am going to turn it over to Maggie Birchall, who is your presenter tonight. So it's all yours, Maggie.
Thank you, Mallory. I am so happy to be here with everyone. I'm so happy you're all here. And like Mallory just said, being here is self-care. Being here is carving out some time for yourself. And I was just saying to Mallory, I am so passionate about this topic that my brain is almost can just get to be sort of a traffic jam of like, oh, I have this idea, I have this idea. So these slides are meant to keep me on track. I also want to add that I welcome questions. So if you have a question, please type it in the chat. And Mallory has a sense of what my whole presentation is. I hope it's about 40 minutes. I'm not sure how long it'll go. It depends on if I like read my million notes or not. But if you have a question and Mallory knows I'm not going to cover it, she will interrupt me. And I'm in the education department. I'm used to speaking to groups of kids, and they often have questions, and I often don't get to my slides, and that is okay. So I want to also add that while I'm a teacher, I worked for Caron for it'll be 4 years in October, and I love my work here. I'm here tonight more in a more personal way. I feel like this is service for me. This is very personal for me. I am a parent of an addict. My son is 22 years old. He went to Renaissance last year, and he is still active. And some of you may have children who are still active or may not be, but I'm sure you can relate with the fear that sometimes ebbs into terror, having that, living with that. I'm also a sibling. 2 of my older brothers have been in recovery for 10, 20 plus years, and I myself am in recovery. 8 years ago, I stopped drinking, and actually my drinking, as an aside, I thought was self-care. I thought at 6 o'clock every night, my glass of wine was my self-care. And for some people, that's true. For people who are not addicts, it absolutely could be. But as an addict, as a compulsive person, it became clear to me that it wasn't self-care. It wasn't making me feel better. So I want to be able to dive into all of these areas of my life when I share with you tonight. And also, before I get started, a very big shout out to the Westport support group, some of whom may be on tonight. And I learned so much from them. I facilitated the Westport group for a few years, and the term facilitator is funny because I was just another parent, right? My son's addiction became clear to me while I was facilitating that group. I always had sort of an inkling, but then he really sort of fell off the rails when I was still facilitating. So I wasn't leading them, I was just part of the group. So I also said to Mallory, none of these ideas are original. This is just what I've learned and what I want to share with people tonight. So I want to get started. Oh, great. Already we've got technical difficulties. Okay, so I'm just going to use it's not working. Here we go. Okay, here we go. So topics to cover. And this slide, again, it's for me. It just helps me stay on track. I want to talk about what self-care is, why it's important, and how to do it. I want you to leave with some tools. Again, Mallory and I were talking before, if you leave learning nothing else, or you take away nothing else, I want you to know that taking care of yourself is not selfish. It's imperative. So I'm going to talk more about that. But if you left the webinar right now, just know that carving out time for ourselves is not. So self-care really is coping with stress in a healthy way. And life is stressful. Life is good, but it's not easy. And it's not always good. So I'm going to dip into some more personal background because I think it's important. When I was in my mid-30s, my first husband died unexpectedly. And I was so devastated after he died, but I was so very clear, even at that moment, that I didn't want my whole life to be grief. I didn't want my whole life to be the sadness. So I started then, I mean, I probably started as a child, but I started then really trying to cope with stress in a healthy way, that life is hard. And I remember seeing that life is good, those bumper stickers everywhere after he died. And I would get so mad, like, what do you know? Life isn't good. But now I've come to the other side of that and believe that yes, life is good, but it is not easy. So I like the image of this man who probably, you know, it's a meditating image. And one hand, I think he's got his worry and his stress. And in the other is like the love, the connection, the light of life. So another one of my big points is I want the canvas of my life to be more than just the stress. So that's what self-care is for me. I actually don't even like the term self-care. I think it's gotten sort of overused and cheesy, and it can be this idea of pampering ourselves. So this is what self-care is not. It is not self-focus. It is not really me time. It's not a mani and a pedi and a massage. First of all, those are serious luxuries for people who can afford them. Not all of us can afford that kind of pampering, and that is pampering. And pampering's great. I'm not opposed to it. I love a mani and pedi, and I love that if I could get a massage, I'll get a massage. But that's not what I'm talking about tonight. So I want that to be really clear too. And I think that term self-care just brings to mind that connotation. So moving on, so why is self-care important? I think that we can all agree, even the term self-care to a group of parents is a bit of an oxymoron. So I don't know if you're familiar with this book, but most of you probably are. It's a classic, The Giving Tree. And it's a beautiful children's picture book. I remember reading it when I was little, and I would read it, and I was like, wait a minute, this is really sad. And the idea is that the tree is like the mother or the father, and she gives and she gives and she gives to this little boy. And you probably can't read this, but it says, and she loved a little boy very, very much, even more than she loved herself, which always kind of chokes me up because I think of my own son. And I think those of us who are parents know that we would just give anything for our children. But in the end, the tree has given so much, she's just a stump. And that's why self-care is so important. I don't want to end up not being able to give anything more. So that's in a nutshell why. All right, so I'm going to see if this video works. And Mallory, you can tell me if you can hear it or not.
You're good.
All right. Oh, great. Okay. So I love that video, and I think that's from one of our colleagues, Selena, who's so amazing. And I don't know if she's given one of these talks, but she's awesome. Again, that's just sort of a great illustration of when we give and we give and we give, and we're depleted. So at the end, before he gets home to his dog, he's just depleted. He has nothing else to give. He's just been taking care, taking care, taking care. And his self-care was his dog when he came in. It's just so important that we fill our buckets somehow. So one of the ways that I take care of myself, and I hope that, and I'm sure, knowing Caron and knowing all of these webinars and what you've been learning, you've learned about healthy boundaries. So on my screen, I can't see the guy on the right, but I'm pretty sure you can see all 4 figures here. And I love this. This actually helps me understand what really healthy boundaries are. They are not walls, right? They just help people know where the door is. And for me, healthy boundaries help me know where the door is, because I actually have had trouble with my own boundaries, which is probably the reason that I would every night at 6 o'clock drink a glass of wine, because I was depleted, and it was like, I'm done. Now I'm done. I can't give anymore. And since then, I've learned how to just protect myself, but not wall myself off. So what I used to be was sort of in between the limited. I never was non-existent, but I'd be sort of loose. I'd let it all in, and I'd feel like the guy in the video where I was kind of just turning darker and darker and darker. And then at the end of the day, I would just, like, walls came up. An extreme example of this for me is one of our children. Okay, so just by way of explanation, after my first husband passed away, I had 2 young children, and I remarried 3 years later, and I'm still married to that man today, Tom, and he had 5 children, and his wife had passed away. So together we had 7 children. So boy, oh boy, would it have been great for me to have had healthy boundaries then, but better late than never. So one of our children a few years ago was diagnosed with a very serious mental illness. And I don't know, I know a lot, there's so much co-occurring addiction with mental illness. In this situation, this particular son does not have an addiction problem, but he has an extreme, very serious mental illness. It's not depression, it's not anxiety, it's more than that. And that one summer, before we realized what it was, and if any of you have children or loved ones with mental illnesses, a lot of times they don't show up until the person's in their early 20s. And so we were sort of chasing this moving target of what is wrong, what is happening. And we thought it was depression and anxiety. And I spent a summer when that son was living with us I just gave him my all. And not knowing what was healthy for me, I just went down this road with him of depression and anxiety. And it actually was more than that. It was a little bit of psychosis. That didn't happen to me, but I just sort of lost myself. And I went away and I was with some old friends of mine, more self-care. I do it every year. We meet in a lake out west where I grew up. And I realized, oh my gosh, I can't give anymore. But instead of creating healthy boundaries in a loving way, the walls came up. So that is not what we're after here. I love this quote from Brene Brown. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. So thinking about the addicts in our lives who we love, I desperately don't want to disappoint my son. I want to give him everything, and I want him to know how much I love him. And that is often how we show our love. It's like, yes, you can have the time, and yes, I can help you with this and I can help you with this, but I am learning to risk disappointing other people. And it's hard. It's hard, but I want to talk about how to do these things too. So as I'm sure you know this, addiction is a disease of isolation. So it's a disease of isolation. So I think about my own addiction. So, you know, it wasn't until I was in my 40s that the wine drinking really became a problem for me. And then I realized that if I stopped drinking with the help of a support group, I could go a lot deeper and understand so much more about the whole brain disease of addiction. And if I go back, starting at a really young age, there was a lot of upheaval in my childhood, a lot of uncertainty, moving and changing households and death and remarriage. There was so much. And I remember feeling so lonely. And I filled up that loneliness with friends. I would just give up anything to be with a friend. I used to horseback ride, and I used to sew, and I would take dance lessons. I did all these things that I loved, but as soon as I met a friend that I loved, I would just quit everything, and everything was for the friend. So I thought the friend was the self-care, but really it was just trying to fill up this hole. And I think those of us who love addicts, either active or in recovery, I think I should just speak for myself that is isolation too. I feel alone. You know, all of my friends have healthy kids who aren't addicts, who are out in the world doing great things. And I feel like, oh my gosh, I have a mentally ill son, and another one who's struggling with depression, another mental illness, and then my other son who has anxiety and addiction, right? And so I can feel really alone. So the antidote to this isolation is connection. And that to me is true self-care. So I want to share, now, Mallory, if you could open the chat, or you can read it to me if you want, but I want to hear from people about how you connect. Maybe since you joined this group, or maybe always in your life, how do you connect in the world? I'd love to hear. And Mallory, you can read it to me, or.
Yep, I opened up the chat, so you can feel free to use the chat, and you'll be able to see what everyone says. And Maggie, if you want,
So
I can read them
look
too.
at it too, Mallory.
You should be able to.
Oh, cool. Oh, awesome. Yay. Okay. So oh, and that was Selena. Good. Go to a meeting. Okay. People are being shy. That's fine. So I'm going to close the chat. And I thought people might be shy, or people are doing other things, and that's totally fine. That's self-care too. So going to a meeting is huge self-care. For me, connecting with a friend and moving my body at the same time. So again, this is another person, Mallory, and I love Sanjay Gupta. He's a doctor, he's a neurologist, and he's on the news, and he's written books. And he has said, if there's one thing that you could do for your brain health, it is go for a brisk walk with a friend or a loved one, and you're connecting. So you're connecting and you're moving your body. And I really want to be aware, this is not like pampering, right? This isn't costing money. It's not like, oh, retail therapy. And I didn't even list a therapist here. I actually think going to therapy is a wonderful thing. But again, going to a therapist can be a luxury of time, a luxury of money, right? Sometimes like too much therapy, too many support groups, that can also feel like, oh, it's stressing me out. So taking that breath and figuring out, what do I need right now? I wrote Coffee Shop to Work or Study. So since COVID hit, we're all, well, not all of us, but a lot of us are alone working on our computers. So I've gotten into a habit where I just take a couple of hours, I mean, not every day, but I'll take my computer to a coffee shop or to a place where I can just sit and eat a sandwich and also work. just not that I'm talking to other people, but I just feel like I'm connecting with humanity. I am not alone. This is a big one that is very, very hard for a lot of people, but resting in the middle of the day is something. I'm almost like a nap bully. Like I believe that taking 45 minutes or an hour, if you can, even if it's after work at the end of the day, if it's a half an hour at the end of the day, if you're working full time, but if you're working part-time or you're not working any time in the day, to disconnect. And actually it is a connection with myself, which again, as an addict, I was always, and I don't think this is just true for addicts. I think this is true for so many of us, pushing away uncomfortable feelings, pushing away uncomfortable feelings. I'm too busy. I've got this, and then I don't have to think about it. But sometimes when I just disconnect, listen to music, read my book. I read a lot of fiction because I love it. I think it's a great escape, but it's a healthy escape. It's not a binge eating escape. It's not drugs or alcohol escape. It's a healthy escape. Or I'll listen to a podcast. And when I take that 45 minutes or an hour, I know for a fact I gain it at the end of the day. It's like the second half of my day, or even like the end of my day, I feel alert and present. And so I think that's a huge gift to myself, and it's a gift to the people around me. Again, that self-care is a gift to the people around you. And a family meal, and I know that is really hard. And maybe it's just with one family member. Well, I have this funny image of a family meal when my 4 youngest kids were all in high school, and they were I made dinner, and it's like dinner time, and I think my husband was working, and so they all just helped themselves and they plopped down at the kitchen kind of counter, and there were only 4 seats. And so they were the 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, and they all sat down. And I was like, So I went to the table and I was sitting behind them. And I remember snapping a picture and sending it to my friends like, oh, here's our family meal. But you know what? It still was a family meal. We were laughing, and I heard them talking and connecting. And a class is helpful because again, it's a connection with humanity, service, volunteering, any kind of service. Your friend needs you to talk. It's just so nice. Again, it's zooming out. When I connect with the rest of the world, I feel like I can be that man with the really uncomfortable stress and worry. Yes, it's still there. I'm not trying to escape it, but I'm seeing that my life is bigger than just that. So when I connect, it's gratitude. It's all these things that are all part of the world. And having a pet is wonderful. And my colleagues at work are so wonderful. And I hope that those of you who work have work friends who you can laugh with and talk with and connect with. So this is my main way of caring for myself.
Maggie, I just want to share with you, because a couple did come in to me privately, and they really do mirror a lot of what you said. So quite a few people said having friends that are vulnerable and will also share their own struggles. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you. I'm so glad you said that. It's a real connection. Yeah, it's not like, how are you? Fine. And I remember sometimes a couple people would say to me after my first husband died, hey, Maggie, how are you? Good? And I'd just be like, wait. And there is this element in our society, and maybe in everybody's society, that everybody wants everything to be fine. And it's not, and nobody's life is, but yes, connecting with friends who share their struggles, their suffering, and also their joy. And that's another thing I want to say about the support group. I loved being part of this parent support group, because some parents were sharing joyful moments, reconnecting with their children who were in recovery, and other parents were in fear and loss and sadness, but they were gaining hope. So yes, thank you. And thank you for chatting, and keep on. Okay, wise. Okay. So I want to spend a little bit more time talking about mindfulness because this is a big part of my self-care too. So, and I've given a whole presentation just about mindfulness, but again, I want to make it really practical for everybody. It's not just, sitting on the cushion for 30 minutes. I want to give you some tips that you could actually try immediately. So mindfulness is simply paying attention on purpose, in the moment, non-judgmentally. The difference between mindfulness and meditation is that meditation is the practice that will bring us to more mindfulness in our everyday life all day long. So if I sit and meditate every day for 20 minutes, which by the way, I don't do, even though I'm a huge fan, and I'll tell you what I do in a minute, because copy me if you want. But if I sit and meditate every day for 20 minutes, it is training my mind to concentrate, to have clarity, and to sort of learn acceptance of what's happening at the moment without being what it is. So I'm not judging it. One of my favorite meditation teachers is Joseph Goldstein, and he has, and I'll tell you how to follow him too, but he has some wonderful mantras. And one of them that I've just glommed onto lately is, it's okay. It's okay to feel this. Whatever is happening is okay. I don't have to like it, but it's not me, and it's okay. It's okay that I'm terrified right now about my child or the future, or it's okay that I'm sad about the past. But I love his mantra. So I'll give you a link on how to follow him too. So here are some super easy ways to be mindful in your daily life. So another thing that I did not like is, and this was, a few years ago, I've got so much energy. I don't want to just sit around and just meditate. Also, I have so much to do. It feels like a waste of time. I mean, I've heard so many people say that, but I want to just back up and say there has been so much research done, so much scientific evidence for the benefits of mindfulness. So here's a really big takeaway. When your body is connected with your mind, like they're doing the same thing. I am in the moment right now, brushing my teeth. My mind is here, brushing my teeth, and my body is brushing my teeth. They have figured out scientifically that people are happier when their brains are doing that. I don't know why. It feels like magic. I tell my kids this all the time, my own children, but I mean my students who I'm talking to. I don't even want to overthink it. When we are paying attention to what we're actually doing in the moment, we're happier. So right now, if I could just stop myself, take a breath, and be here, that's it. And I hope all of you just took a breath. Another line I love, and I can't even remember which teacher said this, was just today, just now, just this. So being mindful right at this moment, whatever you're doing, you might be in the kitchen washing dishes, but maybe you've got your earbud in and you can hear me, so just like I'm washing dishes. And it may seem like, well, that's so boring. I want to escape these boring tasks, but actually there's this curiosity that starts. And really, self-care is in some ways like the best kind of selfishness, because I just want to be more serene. I want to be happier. And it turns out that being mindful does make us feel better. Here's another tool from another wonderful teacher, Tara Brach. A lot of you may have heard of. And this is one that I taught when I gave my mindfulness talk a couple of years ago in New York. This is a great acronym, RAIN. So this is when, you can use this at any time, but imagine a scenario where you're talking to a loved one and it's super intense. like whatever it is, you can imagine it. Like there's a lot of emotion with our loved ones. So the R is just recognize, pause, and recognize the moment. I'm experiencing an uncomfortable feeling. And the A is just allowing it to be there, accepting it, and not pushing it away. I am like the queen of pushing away bad feelings. And I'm learning, I'm a slow learner, but I am learning, like they come and then they go. And when I'm pushing it away, it's actually adding to my suffering. The I is investigate. What's going on here? Why am I reacting like this? Am I angry about something else that happened earlier? Just taking a breath. And again, this all happens within seconds, but just like breathe and rain, even saying rain. And I've shared this with friends. I remember one friend in particular, she said, I couldn't even remember what the letters stood for, but I just said rain, and I just took a breath and calmed down. And the I is non-identification. These strong, uncomfortable feelings are not who we are. And sometimes with my addicted son, I just feel like I am that nag. I am that one who keeps saying, you've got to change, you've got to change, you got to change. But that's not really who I am at my core. And a few slides back, talking about how we connect, that's how I've learned who I am at my core. Those ways I've learned for me to connect. So this is another image from Brene Brown, more about feelings. So if I am doing rain and I have like burst into a rage at somebody in my family, I can just take a moment, obviously not right in the moment. And right in the moment, it's okay to say, oh my gosh, my emotions are so big right now. I just need to back up and just breathe for a second. But nobody's perfect. And sometimes we just flip our lid, and then later on, we can go talk it out. Figuring out what is underneath that huge sort of overwhelming emotion, which a lot of times is anger, can be so helpful too. There's a phrase, and I don't know if it's Brene Brown, but it's somebody, it's, name it to tame it. If I can name the feeling, it takes some of the power out of the feeling. I teach little kids as well as older students, but with our little kids, we're teaching social emotional learning. We're just teaching them emotional literacy. So the more words we have to attach to our feelings, the better off we are, because we can really explain it like, oh, I was actually jealous. That's what that was about. And you don't necessarily have to admit that to the person that you were mad at, but it's good for me to know that about myself, because then it can just tame the feeling. So this mindfulness, these boundaries, like the connection is sort of, the connection stuff is really your day-to-day work that you need to do. But these bigger concepts like the mindfulness and the boundaries are teaching me to respond, not to react. So what that gives me is a little bit of space between the trigger, the stimulus, and my response. And that to me, again, is true self-care, that I can be my best self in this really difficult situation. All right, so I have a little activity, and again, I hope you guys aren't, who knows? We'll see what they do here, Mallory. But here's your assignment in the chat. Please don't be shy. I would like you to list all of the good feelings you can think of right now. Just list them all. All the good feelings you can think of. Nobody's doing it. Oh, I got a nice direct message from Jim. This is so nice. I'm going to respond to that, Jim.
I see some coming in, Maggie, and some are coming to me, and some.
Okay.
I see rain, love, joy, peace, thunderstorms, happiness, a lot of joy, gratitude, peace, calm, surprise, gratitude.
Okay. Ooh, I feel this audience, you guys are so great. I love this because you have, I can tell a lot of recovery in your world, right? Gratitude is another, I should have a whole slide on gratitude, serenity, courage. Okay. Surprise. So yeah, these are all your good feelings. Now I want everybody to switch gears and write all of the bad feelings you can think of. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure Linda's that was a good one. Yes. Okay, so guilt, shame, sadness, uncertainty, fear, anger, embarrassment. Yes, death, fear. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining in. And at the end of this, I want to go back to gratitude, and I want to respond to another thing. Okay, so it was a trick question. There are no good feelings and there are no bad feelings. They're just feelings. And some of them are extremely uncomfortable. And the comfortable ones, we don't notice as much. But gratitude is such a good way to bring the comfortable ones into focus. So remember that, here's a really good quote in this: you are not your feelings. We are not our feelings. We're just experiencing them, and they're okay. And sometimes I have, like, my sister and I talk sometimes when I'm in a really grumpy mood, or she is, and she'll say, oof, you're feeling hateful, which is like our worst one. And I think, oh, I hate that. I don't want to be that person. But this is a good reminder. I'm not that person. We're not our feelings. It's the rain we walk in, but we don't have to become the rain. You know the rain will pass, you walk on, and you remember the soft glow of the sun that will come again. And I know some of you may be in crisis. When I have been in crisis, I can't really believe this. The whole canvas of my life feels like the rain. It feels like a dark cloud. And that's when my support system can sort of believe for me. Somebody mentioned a way of connecting was prayer. And again, I know this is very personal and not everybody, believes in a higher power, but I actually think just believing that I'm not in control of everything is an immense help and feeling of connection. Like just connecting with the universe. Like I'm just turning it over. I'm just going to turn this fear over to the universe. I have a friend who thinks it's the clouds, whatever it is. But that feeling of connecting with that divine love is very powerful for me. Again, I can only speak for myself, but I think I'm glad that somebody wrote that in the text. So this is just, I liked this quote. All right, so gosh, I don't even know what time it is, Mallory. Okay, good. I feel like I'm on target because I wanted this to be about 40 minutes long. So right now, these happen to be my favorites. Mallory and I read a ton of books. We're always sharing them with each other. And sort of like the book of the moment, right? So I want to talk a teeny bit about each one of these, and I'm happy to we have a page of resources here at the end of this, and we can share it with everybody if anybody's interested. I heard Samantha Boardman on a podcast, or she was interviewed, and it could have even been something Mallory shared with me. I can't remember, or I shared it with her, but I love this. She is a psychiatrist, and she said, years ago, one of her patients came in and said, sometimes I dread coming in here because all we're talking about are the problems. And she was very humbled, but then she was really curious. Yeah, doctors are just focused on the problem. Here's the problem, here's the problem, here's the problem. And she did a whole bunch of research, and she learned that the opposite of depression is not happiness, but vitality. And I love it. And she has all sorts of great little tips on how to bring that into our lives. A lot of them, you guys already know, it's how we're connecting in life, being engaged with the world and feeling that vitality that's what I'm after now. And I'm in the second half of my life. So this has become very precious to me. Atomic Habits is another book that we read last year, and I really love it. The big takeaway from Atomic Habits, and this is really good, I think, if you want to start a mindfulness practice, a meditation practice, is to create a habit. You want to start with the very shortest amount of time that you could handle on your very worst day. So that might be 10 breaths. And you'll be surprised, if you're not a meditator, how hard it is to take 10 breaths in a row, paying attention to every breath. It is ridiculously hard. I'll start and then I'll get distracted and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even finish the 10 breaths. So it could just be 10 breaths. It could be 5 minutes, and then it could be 10 minutes. But Atomic Habits is so good. And he's got a website, he's got a newsletter. I get the newsletter, just a short email every week on how to create. So instead of like, oh, I have so many bad habits and I need to break them and I'm feeling bad, it's like, how can I bring on something good that won't take up more time? It will make space, because I'm working smarter, not harder. And then Dan Harris is one of my all-time favorite people for writing the book 10% Happier, which is about the whole mindfulness meditation explosion that hit our country. And he was such a skeptic, and he's funny and he's smart, and he's a real believer now. And he has an app that I highly recommend. He has world-class teachers on the app. It's a podcast. It's single short meditations, long meditations, talks, courses. And this is a podcast that I do plug. It's $15 a month, which you would think, oh my gosh, an app, not a podcast, it's an app, but the podcasts are in it. And while that sounds like a lot, it breaks down to 50 cents a day. And I cannot tell you how often I use it and share it. And I love it. So almost all the people I mentioned tonight, Joseph Goldstein, Tara Brock, Samantha Boardman, I don't know if James Clear is on there. Who else? Just so many wonderful, wonderful people. They're all in that app. So I cannot recommend these books enough. Oh, and then yes, sometimes all we can do are the basics. Eat, sleep, move. Some days I can't do anything else. So the rest is just gravy. And so I'm not going to feel bad. I cannot control my sleep. So I don't want to freak out in the middle of the night and be like, I can't sleep, I can't sleep, I can't sleep. But I know that if I move in the day, and I don't mean working out for an hour, although working out for an hour is fantastic if I can, but sometimes it's just going up and down the stairs a few times, walking around the block. If I move, I will sleep better and I will feel better. And if I eat well. So I used to think self-care was, oh, I'm going to have a big piece of cake. And don't get me wrong. I sound like I love cake. I love cake. And I could eat half a cake. I have been known to eat like 3/4 of a pie. So, but what I'm learning, and slowly, is that if I eat really healthy food, the reward from that comes later. And it is powerful. So if I eat well and I move a little, I'll sleep better. And that's all. Sometimes, some days, that's all I can do. So when it is crisis time, which I have experienced and all of you have experienced, it's shifting down and not expecting too much from my toolbox of self-care. All I'm going to do is eat right, move, try to connect with somebody you love. But that some days that is just it. Oh, and the 7 C's. I mentioned this in my parent group a few months ago. I don't know, maybe a year ago. I haven't been facilitating it for a long time now. So I think everyone knows about the 3 C's. You didn't cause the addiction of your loved one. You can't cure it and you can't control it. And this is something we share with kids. So this is like little kid language, but just like, everything I need to know in life, I learned in kindergarten. It's the same thing. A lot of times I find myself sharing the ideas that we are teaching children to my adult friends. But we can care for ourselves in the midst of the crisis. We can communicate our feelings, which is name it to tame it. We can make good choices. Okay, I'm gonna move. I'm gonna walk around the block. I'm gonna sit down for 5 minutes and just breathe. I might read my book. We can make good choices that make us feel healthier and more serene, and we can celebrate ourselves. And I think that's all I have. And I like this quote too. It's not selfish to love yourself, take care of yourself, and to make your happiness a priority. It is necessary. And I truly believe all of that. So resources we will share. This was a good article in the New York Times, and Dan Harris was interviewed in it. It was about how to meditate when you can't sit still, because I think so many people struggle with that. So I am going to stop sharing and say hello to everybody.
Let me stop recording here.
Okay.